Okay, so welcome to the podcast, Jean. I'm glad to meet you and talk to you here today. So, hardly know you, just barely spoke with you. So, we'll get to know each other and what we have in common in our healer paths, and we'll learn from each other, I'm sure. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jean Atman, and I call myself a self-mastery mentor and energy medicine specialist. I help people sort of get out of their own way. I feel like there's so many of us that grow up with trauma and limiting beliefs that we develop in our childhood, and we tend to carry those things forward, and we're still applying those things in our adulthood, and those things aren't serving us. So I help people sort of unpack all that stuff that they're still carrying.
Mhm.
It's kind of like taking all the clothes that you've had since birth and starting to purge those out of your closet.
Right.
Let's only focus on what we actually need and that fits now. So I sort of help people unpack all the stuff that is not serving them and have freedom to build a life that they really choose.
Okay. And when did you start practicing professionally with this work specifically?
Yeah, my work has been a really kind of an evolutionary process. I started to engage with energy healing back in 2000. And I was always very sensitive to energy, but I didn't know it was a thing. I thought it was just
Mhm.
something weird about me. And
Right.
so I tried to suppress it a lot. And then in 2000, when I actually kind of reacquainted myself with it, I guess in 97,
Mhm.
started playing with it. But then in 2000, I found my Reiki master. And as soon as I had my first attunement, I was so excited because everything shifted. And it was almost like I finally felt a little bit more at home here on this planet.
Right.
And I was so excited to learn that other people understood this and knew what this was and could actually teach me into what I was kind of learning or feeling within.
Mhm.
So that kind of started the journey, and my work has evolved since then. So it's been, over a 20-year
Right.
journey that continues to evolve within different modalities, channelings, and all these, the dialogue that I receive, it just continues to kind of morph and grow and evolve.
And how old were you back then? Like you seem like you were probably in your 20s or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, because it's like it's pretty wild to wake up like that, because some people don't wake up until they're a little bit older. So I also was in my 20s when I started getting interested in all this stuff. And
Mhm.
not knowing that you're sensitive to energy, but when you realize that you were, it's such a gift, you
It
know?
is. Did you find that you had like some resistance to life here before you kind of found that? What was your kind of teenage years like? Did you feel like you were connected? Or I'm always curious about that within people.
Yeah, I didn't know. Like I've talked about it before where I felt like my family thought I was just like a pain in the ass, kind of like a picky, particular, but I didn't like feel like I didn't belong on earth, or like I didn't have that kind of feeling, where I know some other healers feel like they never
Mhm.
felt like they belonged. It didn't occur to me that that would be a path for me until I was like 30. When I was 24 is when I went, or 22, I went to massage school, and that just felt like I fit in that world. But then
Mhm.
I'd slowly stopped fitting, and the energy healing thing woke up when I was like 30. So, and then I
Mhm.
heard about people saying that they didn't feel like they belonged and they didn't get along with their families. And I really didn't understand that. So I didn't
Mhm.
feel like the black sheep up until that point, and then now I do. So
Oh, funny.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting as you're
yeah.
evolving into your own a little bit more, maybe.
Right. Yeah. It shifted my perspective. But so you had a wake up call kind of like around 2000 with being led to Reiki. Was that kind of
Well,
like,
I got a psychology degree because I'm super interested in the human condition and why people
mhm,
do the things they do and what makes them tick. And I almost got into criminology with really deviant behaviors because I was like, what propels people to be a serial killer? What propels people to do all these things that are against the norm and culturally unacceptable and morally unacceptable and all
mhm,
these things. And so I was super curious about what makes people do these things. So I went into the field of psychology, and after I got my degree, I was just I thought, I don't want to sit in an office and really communicate with these models that people want you to kind of fall into. I wanted something more free flowing. So I went back to school for neuromuscular therapy and practiced that for several years. And when I was in massage school, that's when
okay.
I was introduced to Reiki. Go out and find a modality that interests you.
Right.
And so as I started researching, I was like, what is Reiki? And my Reiki master, I was getting some body work by him one day, and he was working on my heart. And all of a sudden I felt this huge vibration and my eyes popped open. I said, "What is that?" He says, "That's Reiki." And I was like, "Oh my gosh. Okay. You're my people," you know? And so, there started kind of a deeper dive into the energy healing, but I've always been really interested in helping people move through whatever their stagnancies are.
Right.
But, that just continues to evolve with how I apply that. But my mission has been that same way since birth. And we spoke about this before we recorded, but my upbringing, it was a really, really toxic household, a lot of abuse, a lot of cruelty, no protection from it. And so I feel like I really connected with the upper realms because that was the place where I felt safe, where I felt accepted, where I felt that I could have something of love and connection. And as we spoke about too, with having all of these kind of sociopathic, narcissistic personality types super focused on themselves and their emotions, and I felt like it was my responsibility to pacify them and to take care of them and to manage them so that I could stay safe.
Yeah.
So I got super attuned to what people were feeling,
Right.
how to navigate that. And so that, this whole big lifelong journey of really a lot of experiential lessons as well as educational, learning modalities and certifications has all kind of helped build into what I'm doing now.
I know, because it's like when I was teaching people about being an empath and like empath protection, I was, educating myself further on what it was I was teaching about. And that's where I learned that it was super duper common for people who were raised in a narcissistic household to grow in their sensitivity, because it's like you had to be on hyper alert. So the crossovers of people who are strong sensitive empaths are it's common that they were raised in that kind of a place. And I learned about the book Dodging Energy Vampires by Christine Northrup, and I remember reading that book, and that was really helpful in helping my clients, because I wasn't raised in that kind of environment, I wanted to better understand it. And she was so clear in that book, like, you cannot change a narcissist, because there's like that little piece of like, we're like, oh, if we could just love them and make them whole, and it's like, you got to get to a point where you're like, if they're a narcissist, they're a narcissist, and it's sad because narcissists I don't know, you can correct me, if they're not just born that way, it's because they're born in an environment that kind of did that to them, right? Is that right? Or is it something that's just comes with the person?
I think from a soul level perspective, I think a lot of times those wounds travel far back into the past, or simultaneously, however you like to see it.
Right.
But so I do feel like a lot of people come in with those deep level wounds, and within each lifetime, we have the opportunity to heal them.
Right.
And so I see narcissists as people that are just deeply wounded, that are in complete resistance or denial to their own healing. And so they're projecting the stuff out onto those around them many times. So, there's just so much resistance within their field. So that's kind of what prevents them sometimes from healing.
Right.
But I think with each lifetime, there's an opportunity to,
right.
Just kind of depends on how deeply ingrained things are. But, as probably when you come in with that type of energy, and that is in your vibration, you draw in more experiences that solidify that in. So many people that have that coming in do experience deep level trauma when they're in childhood.
So when you are working with people, just not to change direction totally, but just curious how people find you as a healer, and how do they like learn about you, or what are they seeking? Because like, are you doing one-on-one table time? Are you doing more counseling or coaching?
A little bit of everything.
Right.
Everything. Now that it was interesting because guidance told me in December of 2019 to close my office because my practice was building.
That's great.
Yeah, it's perfect timing. An international practice. And so I had clients all over the world. And so to maintain a brick and mortar space here just wasn't really serving me anymore.
Right.
So in 2019, they were like, close your office, close your office, I was like, okay, I'm listening. So
stop bullying me.
I know. It was like, you get those signs on repeat. Right. You're like, okay, I need to do it now.
Yeah.
And so I closed, and then, the whole COVID thing hit, and I was like, oh, thank you guys for that little heads up.
Right.
So all my sessions now are via Zoom, and, people ask, well, how do you do energy healing at a distance. And I always compare it to a cell phone. You dial a particular number, frequency, and you reach that person, you can communicate. Energy healing works the same
Oh
way,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
Tuning into that frequency. So I can see what's happening at a deeper energetic level. So typically like a session with me would be to bring the loudest thing in your life into session. What is the thing that makes you most uncomfortable now? Because that's the thing that's showing up, that's kind of raising its hand saying, I'm ready to be healed. I'm going to be looked at. So we just dive into the energy of that and see where that original wound is, or as deep as we can go. And I don't ever bully my way in. I've heard some people, really have trauma from energy healing experiences.
Yeah.
I don't
too much too fast. Yeah.
Yeah. And because you need a chance to shift and have that kind of gentle release, which is actually more profound, because when you can soften, you actually go deeper at a more peaceful level.
That's true with like body work too. There's, I forget if it's like melting or whatever, but there's different things where the longer you kind of hold, the deeper you'll be into like visceral. But if you were to go aggressively, obviously that's going to hurt and they would push you back. But that's slow melting is similar. Yeah. That's
cool. If you go in too hard, even like that's a perfect example with the musculature. If you go into a cold muscle with an elbow, the body's going to contract and complete resistance. And then to force your way through, it's almost like a fracturing of that energy, you know? So we go into the core as deeply as we can and just release some layers, as everything is a layered approach. It's typically that original wound and so many things compound on top of that. You got to clear through all those layers to get to that baseline.
For sure. And do you usually do like a series, because you're like, this is too much for, you'll do like a 6 series over so many weeks or months or something?
Yeah, I've sort of found that 3 months is kind of the sweet spot to be able to unpack everything and move people in a direction that they want to be going in. And so we move through those layers, and I'm a teacher at heart. So I love to teach people how to help and heal themselves.
Yeah.
And so
share the power.
Yeah, exactly. Because we all have that ability. We're just kind of trained and taught away from it
to go outward and be like, you do it.
Yeah. And so we'll start with, I might do a little bit more heavy lifting in the clearing, but then once a field is decongested, then they can feel things more intimately for themselves, and they start to translate those options for themselves. And then we guide them through how to help. So by the end of our time together, they're feeling super empowered about how they can help themselves, and anything that comes up in the future, which things will, this is our evolutionary path, then they're more equipped how to manage those things for themselves. And of course, I always tell people, I'm not going to kick you off my table at the end of our time. If you're wanting, assistance building into the new, or if you need a tune up or things like that, you can come back. And of course we can, continue the work.
Yeah. It's not 1 and done or 5 and done or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like personally, I know when I'm in my work all the time, and I know when I can handle things myself, and I know when I need more support through it, and then I have resources because when you think about when people come for support, you sort of accelerate the process. I don't want to sit and marinate in something.
Right.
When I know I've got this happening and I'm clear of what that is, but I'm having trouble seeing into my own depth, finding somebody that can offer support and some more of an observer's perspective to help me really move through it quickly so I can move on with life already. Like I get that. So I like to also provide that for others. Yeah.
And it's cool because you're probably telling people things that they already know, but maybe you're or giving them insight into things that maybe are hidden from them, but it's something that, like, I feel like when I'm working with people, I'm telling them stuff but because I'm saying it and it's out loud, it makes it more real for them.
Yeah. So, well, it touches that layer because we are in a lot of denial and resistance within sometimes. And then when you hear it, it activates it within that resonance, and you're like, oh, and then it starts to move.
Yeah.
So awareness, we're offering awareness, which is huge in starting the movement.
Right. I know. Cause I think I remember when I was reading up on you, you talked about like reading the chakras, right? Or did you say that? Yeah. Cause that's where I'm like, oh, we have like a lot of crossovers. Yeah. I didn't know you did massage school. That's funny.
Yeah, I know. I think we all kind of start out in the same place, wanting something, but dipping our toes in. And I remember I had a friend and client on the table one time when I really delved into the energy healing part of it. She asked me, she said, are you still doing massage? And I said, yeah. She says, yeah, you can't. You're not supposed to do that anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I thought, when they have to bandit one of my clients to tell me something that I'm clearly not listening to, I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm done. I gotta really move into the energy part of things.
Yeah.
So that's when I shifted.
I know. I'm always like resistant to do massage, because I'm like, I mean, I'll do it. And I know I do an amazing job. Like, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but
I know.
yeah, because it's like I do a good, but it's like, it's less my passion than the energy work, but I don't even offer massage without energy work connected to it. It's just like a Reiki infused massage or just Reiki. You're not going to get a massage with me. You're going to get the energy too. So
yeah, well, the energy moves the depth. You can move the muscles, but the energy moves the depth of that, of why you're stressed in the first place, or why that dis-ease in the body is holding. So if you're not doing that part, it's kind of
it's just
doing
topical.
a disservice, I guess.
Yeah. I know I'll be phasing it out in the future, but I've stepped away from it, but it's still there. So I think somewhere in the next 10 years, I'll probably quit 100% with the massage, but it does bring me a little bit of joy, but not as much as the Reiki does. So
yeah, I know when you finally let go, it's amazing how, because I realized that too. I haven't done massage in over a decade and a half, maybe. But when you finally let go of that piece and you just get in, it's like all of a sudden, all these other things start to fill in of those gifts that are like, hey, you remember, so just floating that out there for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I know eventually I'll cut the cords. It's just I haven't yet.
Yeah, you got to know your timing.
with COVID, it forced me to like no longer be dependent on touching people to read them, and I knew I could, but I just didn't ever put myself in that situation. But once COVID happened, I'm like, oh, it's the only way I can help people is by working on them remotely. So I had to like toughen up and face it. And it totally blows my mind. It's like you do get so much more out of the energy work when you're just doing the energy work.
Yes.
And from a distance, because you're just entering their field. You're just in it. It's just and it's all in it's all intuition. It's all in your abilities, and it can be mind-blowing. And I love it. I just worked on a lady yesterday doing a distance session, and I'm like, whatever I was getting, she's like, oh my God, I was just like, this is so crazy. I love it so much.
I know.
So you were talking about like preparing us for the holidays and relationships and stuff like that. So you want to get into that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this has been a really intense year. I mean, good Lord, 2020 with the whole shutdown of everything, and everybody was, like you said, forced into making these shifts that many of us were ready for, but we just didn't know we were ready for it until we have to do something, kind of rally. And so there's been a lot of that cultivated change in 2020, but I feel like we were sort of in resistance because so many people you heard, I just want to get back to normal. I just want to get back to normal. So many people were really gripping and holding on to the old ways last year.
Yeah.
Well, 2021, no, I know this year it was like, okay, we're ripping the Band-Aids off because this stuff doesn't fit. So it's been this massive purge of everything. And I've been doing this work, like I said, for well over 2 decades. I've never seen healing potential like we have right now. And I think because of this ascension process, this great awakening, so many more people are vibrating at a level of openness and potential, which then accelerates that wave to everyone else in the collective, right?
It's so cool. So many people are waking up.
Yeah, I'm so excited because I've been doing this work for so long. I'm like, finally people get it. They're understanding. I'm not like the crazy one anymore. They're like, oh, that's what she's been talking about.
Oh, I was laughing at Five Below the other day. All of the books in like their $5 bin were all like crystals, Reiki, whatever. It was like 4 different books. I took a picture of it. I was like, this is crazy. Like my world is now the norm.
Right. I know. Thank God. It's nice to be able to have that.
Right. Yeah. It's no longer as taboo. Yeah.
It's not. But as we're working through all of these old aspects and old paradigm stuff, it's really asking for this deep level purge. And what I'm seeing now is these old systems, especially childhood wounds. And we've done inner child work throughout, sprinkled in kind of, but I'm seeing the focus is on that now. And as we close out 1 year and start to move into the next, we're already starting to feel the energy of 2022 coming in as we're finalizing the clearing process of this year. Right. And so this year has been about unpacking and purging. And so as we're decongesting all those compounded wounds and things, we're able to get into the core wounds, which is a lot of what happened in childhood.
Right.
And so, as the year progresses, as we're getting into the holiday season, we're being reconnected with our family and that family of origin where a lot of these wounds originated. And so I'm seeing so many triggers coming up, and because we're not as congested, when someone pokes that trigger, it goes right to the core,
Mhm.
really deep, and you feel it right away, and it can create this visceral response or super emotional intensity in ways almost like it's hard to manage, because it literally feels like you're being thrown back into that original wound.
Mhm.
And so what I see is these wounds that happen when we're kids, we don't have the ability to really process what's happening to us. So many people just develop protective mechanisms around them, and that's put in place, and it stays throughout life. So as
Mhm.
adults, we're still carrying these little protected wounds within us,
Mhm.
right? So when that gets charged or poked, you instantly, it's almost like you get thrown back into your 3-year-old self, and you can respond that way,
Mhm.
which is intense. But what's so beautiful about it is this is allowing opportunity to heal at
Mhm.
that depth, if
Right.
you know how to manage those things as they surface.
Right. And what would you recommend people do?
Yeah. So when you're triggered by something, and it's really amazing to be able to kind of trace it back. So let's say you're feeling something. Let's say, give me an example of something recent that happened to you, and we can break it down a little bit.
I don't even remember what my sister said, but she said something about teasing me and making me cry. And she's like, look, I can do it right now. Or like, whatever. It was just like, she was making fun of me at lunch. But that was, I
Mhm.
mean, it was playful about the child, like, you know, like this consciousness of what it was. It wasn't like she was in that like mean mindset. She was just poking fun at the fact that there's that childhood wound in Karen. So
Right. So
yeah.
that you were possibly an emotional child or something like that, or
Yeah,
maybe
that
you were.
yeah, because I'd be teased and I would cry.
Right. And so what happens is, when you're teased about that when you're little, we internalize this as there's something wrong with us. We're
Mhm.
overly sensitive. That doesn't fit here. There's I'm not accepted for who I am. Like, all of these things perpetuate in that undeveloped mind, because we can't just blow it off and say, oh, she's just kidding. That's coming from a silly
Right.
love. We
Right.
can't understand that as a child. So that gets kind of anchored into your system. And then if she does that again, it instantly goes into that place, and it's like it wakes that wound back up. So
Mhm.
when you can see where that started, you can start to go back in and heal that part. And so I've been working with this myself personally, is looking at a picture of my child self
Mhm.
and talking to her, having a dialogue, because there was something that happened within you that said, I'm not accepted, I'm not worthy of love, I'm not whatever the
Mhm.
belief system developed was. So when you can go back to that origin and
Right.
start to let the feelings come forward and come through, and
Mhm.
then start to replace them with something different, like you are
Right.
so loved, and you just start to replace that energy, you mend. And what happens within the timeline work is that healing dominoes forward. And so
Mhm.
the growth and the healing becomes exponential by the time it lands in the now moment.
Yeah, that sounds like theta healing. I don't know if you're familiar with theta healing, but
I am familiar. Mhm.
yeah. So it's just like, you know, you kind of pluck it out and then pop in a new one.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know?
Replace it with
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
fits now for
Right.
your
I am
desires.
lovable and you know, whatever, you
Mhm.
know, it is pretty
Right.
powerful.
So it's different than affirmations, though. Let's
Mhm.
say if you're feeling like I'm not lovable, and then you start saying, I am lovable, I am lovable. So when you get into just the mental body
It's
of
just in the head. Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
right, it's just kind of looping around, and it's not embodying. You don't really
Right.
believe it
Right.
necessarily. That's why I
Right.
think affirmations are a little challenging. But if you can, like what Theta does, is drop it into the
Right.
field,
Mhm.
then that's where the shift actually comes.
Totally. Yeah.
So when you're dropping in the field, or traveling back in time to that original wound, and
Mhm.
correcting the energy in the
Yeah.
imprinting there, that's where
Right.
the real change happens.
Totally. And you'll see it and feel, or see it psychically and feel it, you know, the
Right,
energy of
right.
it. I
And
know,
some
it's
people that don't
amazing.
understand energy healing, the best way to envision this, because some people that aren't familiar might be thinking, how can I do this for myself? To really go back into that child self and feel, kind of nurture that part, almost like parenting
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah, totally.
because
Like
there was
patting
some.
that little girl on the head. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because there was something that felt lacking there. And so that energy stagnation became a part of your field,
Hmm.
and so going in and nurturing that, it kind of melts that away. Again, talking of the melting,
Hmm.
it melts that away, and trust that you've done the work there, trust that you've
Yeah.
healed there, and
Hmm.
just know, because I put some nurturing and intention there, I've
Hmm.
shifted. because
Right.
you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you start to become empowered with, holy cow, I did that. And now all of a sudden, this isn't triggering me anymore.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other
Yeah.
situations come up and you're like, oh, wow, in the past I would say this or that or react this way.
Yeah.
And now I'm not. That's when you know
Right.
it works.
Yes. Yeah. And then you start to learn how powerful you are at healing
Mhm.
yourself and creating your world. And then you're like, what else is in there?
I
What else
know.
can I apply this to?
I know. I love that quote. I don't know whose quote it is, where they're like, if you think you're enlightened, like go spend a weekend with your family,
Right.
So
Right.
it's
Right.
like they have a way of doing that,
Yes. And I mean, the other aspect that's really coming up this year is boundaries.
Mhm.
And so if you're noticing that one, family member really challenges you or triggers you and continues to push their stuff on you or project onto you, when something doesn't feel good. And it's okay to say, I don't want to have this conversation. There's so much
Yeah.
division happening in the world right now, and everybody's really polarized. And so if you find yourself in a situation that just feels really uncomfortable, it's okay to say, I don't really want to talk about this. I'd rather just enjoy company. We can go for a walk. We can, do something
Right.
different. It's
Mhm.
okay to redirect. You don't ever have to sit in a situation that doesn't feel comfortable for you.
Yeah, I know. And to empower people to know that they are allowed to leave a room or to change the subject, even if they
Yes.
don't. I think it's scary to actually say, I don't want to talk about this. I think it's like, like safer to just walk away or to just
Hmm.
actually just pivot and change the conversation. Because sometimes
Hmm.
actually saying it, like your voice might get shaky and you might get emotional. And maybe you don't want to break down like that. Like, I don't know what you would say in that instance, but I think that would be like a safer alternative that rather than confronting people, because sometimes
Hmm.
confronting is uncomfortable. So
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I think there's so much that comes with the aspect of speaking your needs,
mhm.
and it can feel very confrontational
Yeah,
because you're wanting somebody to do something different than what they're doing, which
yeah,
feels confrontational.
yeah.
But if you can come into number one, identifying what your needs actually are. For
Mhm,
instance, this is uncomfortable. I don't want to have this conversation. This is pulling up a lot of things in me that isn't necessary. That
mhm,
awareness is
mhm.
awesome. And then if you can just say, you know what, I really am enjoying your company so much, but I would love to talk about something that isn't so confrontational or isn't so conflicting between
Right,
us.
right,
How does
right.
that sound to you? And you can pose it like, this is my need, and I'm inviting you into something better.
Right,
You
right.
know what I mean? So it's not
Yeah,
confrontational, but it's
yeah,
actually helping people up level together.
right.
And when you speak the truth of your needs, it translates very differently than the manipulation of
Mhm.
trying to do something different. So this person's
Yeah,
talking about this. I don't want to talk about it. So how about those Packers or whatever it is?
yeah. Right,
Everybody's like,
right.
wait, what is that? So it's
Yeah.
kind of that
It's
attempt to
like honoring
change.
it though, but by
Right.
acknowledging. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
It's a deeper level, and you'd be amazed a lot of times for those listeners, how effective that is when
Mhm,
you speak your truth and put it out there, how well it's received.
mhm. I know, it's like just being raw and authentic and vulnerable. Like that's the power in that. I love Brene Brown for having made that so commonplace,
Yeah,
because it
yeah,
really, that's it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And then it's also liberating. So
yeah. It
being in
is.
that
It is.
position, I'm trying to think of any instances like that with my family, but I just know, like, my dad was being like racist one time and I called him out on it. And the whole room got like awkwardly quiet, but I was like, enough already. Cause everyone just kind of like, okay, old man, but I was just like,
Right.
no, it's not okay. The grandkids are really upset. Like the kids are upset, but the grandkids are more upset because they're that much more evolved and sensitive. Like you got to quit the shit, Dad. Like,
Right.
you know,
How did he
so
receive it?
I don't even remember. I think I was shaking and I was just like so upset that I was just, yeah, I don't even remember. I think it was just awkward and quiet. And then somebody just shifted around and everything was okay again. But
Yeah. And then how did you feel after you spoke that?
I was glad because it's like,
Yeah.
he needs to know that he doesn't have the company for that anymore, like he's
Yes.
the last of his generation and it's not being well received in our company,
Right. And
so
you were able to speak into that and stop that,
yeah,
and when you're like, oh, that was awkward, and it's going to be awkward. Like
yeah,
embrace the awkwardness,
yeah,
just embrace that. Know it's
yeah,
coming, be prepared for it and be like, okay, this is what it is. But that feels so much better now that we don't have to keep sitting in this suffering.
yeah, yeah, awkward, brave and kind,
Yes.
totally.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about with the relationship aspects of being around the holidays or?
Yeah, I feel like just really getting into your needs with things and just practicing this stuff. Everybody thinks if I can't do it perfect or right, that I shouldn't do it at all. And that
Mhm.
stagnates people a lot of times in their ability to speak into something that they need. So just think of this as practice. And if you face plant, it doesn't go well, awesome. Then you're not going to do that again. Try something different next time. So there's no, kind of releasing the expectations around things and just getting in touch with your own stuff beyond the expectations of other people,
Yeah.
because the expectations can be so loud and uncomfortable. And when you're sliding back into that child self of, oh, my parents expect me to be this way, but I don't feel that way as an adult, it can feel like there's an inner conflict as to which part of you should be honored in that
Mhm.
moment.
Mhm.
And so I would encourage you to really feel into the now moment. Who are you now? What are your needs now? And really honor that part and see how you want to show up, because everybody else is probably expecting you to still respond or react as that child self. But
Right.
if you're changed now and you're different now and you feel that, alignment is different, respond in that way and see
Yeah.
how people then respond to you, because that's how we all evolve within our dynamics. You don't
Mhm.
want to stay as your child self with your parents. You want to become an adult and grow that relationship into something more aligned with who you are now.
Yeah. I know carrying that weight is a different energy. So
It is
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm appreciating this conversation. I don't know if there's any like any more that we should talk about or or if you just want to give us your contact information. I'm like, which way can we go next?
I know,
But
I know.
I
Well,
but
go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say too, what I've been seeing in the collective consciousness a lot is, especially sensitives, people, empaths and things, there's a lot of survival mode that
Mhm.
is coming through right now too.
Mhm.
And even just having awareness of where your nervous system is,
Mhm.
because tuning in for people that have always been around toxic relationships or grew up in households like that, I notice even with myself, I'm able to tap in now to survival mode deeper than I ever have before. I didn't realize I was still carrying so much of that core
Mhm.
within me. And I've unpacked so much stuff throughout the years, but that core, we're able to
What
see that stuff now.
specifically do you mean about your survival mode? Like what shows up for that?
Right. So even tracing back to where I was born, I mean, I was 3 days old and I was being severely abused.
Oh my
And that
God.
continued and continued and continued, being pushed on the stairs when I was a toddler, like all these things, like really hardcore survival mode. And so I was paying attention recently to the decisions I was making. And as we're, business owners, we're evolving our businesses. I'm not afraid to take leaps to the next level, because
Mhm.
I evolve. I'm not going to stay the same. I need to evolve my business as well.
Right.
So I make kind of big leaps when I do, and I trust that I'm going to land in a soft place.
Mhm.
But what I found very recently is the gap in between the leap and the landing, it's still perpetuating survival mode, because I'm pushing the envelope so much that I'm
Mhm.
actually continuing to perpetuate the survival mode, which is the familiar to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So even though I'm evolving, I'm not doing it in a way that's really honoring of me at a deeper level. So
What like how does it like when you're in the survival mode, are you like freaking out? Are you over preparing? Like what do you mean by your survival mode?
right. So I'll use an example. I recently decided that I had an X5 and my warranty was running out and I didn't want to maintain it. So I decided to get into a different car. So I decided to lease a 2021
Mhm.
Beamer. So do I need to be leasing a $60,000 car? Probably not. Right.
Right.
But my mind is saying, you've had such a rough life and you really love this car and you deserve it and you love the driving, like all these weird little things,
Mhm.
justifications of why I want this car.
Mhm.
But what I find is that within this several $100 more car payment a month, I'm always needing to make sure that I'm covering
Just
all these
kind
other
kind of
things.
regularly sweating, like
Right.
stressing.
So,
Yeah.
well, and it's
Right.
pushing me to the next level, but not in a nurturing way. But you better make sure you've got
Yeah.
this, and then you're investing all this over here. You got to make sure you got that covered. And
Right.
then being an entrepreneur and a single mom and a chronic illness this past year.
No.
So there's all these parts that are
Right.
literally keeping me in survival mode. you know?
Right, right, right.
So learning that that survival mode has literally solidified into a chronic illness in my body,
Mhm.
and going against my own nature,
Right,
autoimmune, right?
right, right,
And so starting to correct that energy, recognizing how I'm leaping maybe too far sometimes,
right,
because I know it's going to come around. It always does, you
right,
know, because that's how I create, but I don't need to get into that survival mode in the interim.
right.
Right. So now as I'm recognizing these choices that I've made and decisions, and realizing I can have a gentler path,
Yeah,
you know, if I'm not chronically kind of addicted to being in survival mode,
yeah. I
right?
feel you. Yeah.
And so when you find that you're kind of justifying decisions to yourself and you're like, oh, it'll be fine, but that in between, if you're creating that angst again, is that necessary, or are you just addicted to something that is so familiar and deeply
Right,
embedded within you?
right, right, right.
So I've been getting into that core of
Mhm.
releasing that place,
That
as
pattern.
opposed to
Yeah.
all the experiences that happen around it.
Mhm.
That's the undercurrent of the whole belly,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
So recognizing why we make decisions that we're making, those adaptive behaviors that we exhibit based on those old programs, you know, are
Mhm.
we still perpetuating that even
Mhm.
when we're not wanting to be there anymore?
Right.
So it's like a huge unpacking of all the trauma from childhood, and learning how to really be in a state of peace and ease.
Mhm.
And then I'm finding that the more I do that, the more things fall away that are hard, the more things come in to support everything I've done more easily. I'm
Mhm.
not continuing to perpetuate that energy as I'm moving through all the layers.
Oh, that's important. And I'm sure you have your own people that you go to for sessions that help
Yeah.
shine a light on those things that you might otherwise not be seeing or willing to see. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know.
It's deep stuff coming up right now.
Yeah. So you're seeing that a lot with other types of healers and empaths and stuff.
Yeah, it feels like right now the trauma is coming up, the depth
Mhm.
of the trauma.
Mhm.
And I have a friend of mine who is working through breast cancer right now too, and watching this unfoldment of how the overgiving, that can't say no to people, all of
Mhm.
these ways that you know this big illness presents itself.
Yeah.
She has to stop. She has to learn to stop and to pause and to focus on herself. And
Right.
just witnessing that transition through this
Mhm.
healing
Right.
is so immense. And now she's
Yeah.
at a place where she can ask for help, she can receive it, she understands that she needs support, and so she's allowing it in. So it's kind of like turning all the channels outward and allowing that stuff to come back in, to
Mhm.
finally find that balance of
Yeah.
receptivity,
Mhm.
because so many of us have been overgivers for so long that we don't even know how to receive,
Right.
you know. And so a lot of that, and again, that's perpetuating that deep trauma. We have to make sure everybody's okay. There's no time
Mhm.
for our needs, you know, until we make time. So I'm
Right.
seeing a lot of that deep level trauma surfacing in really intense ways for people.
Yeah. I know. It like I don't I didn't have like, well, whatever, everyone's got their own traumas, but I didn't have like a trauma that, that I would say was trauma, like growing up and stuff. But I do, like, I went to see my friend for a session a couple weeks ago, and she's like, "Who takes care of you, Karen?" And I just started crying. So it's like, yeah, you're right. Okay, I need to make some more time for myself. Like, and I know better, and I allowed it to slip away, and then I suffer the consequences. So it's like, to be
Mhm.
proactive in that, keeping that balance is so, so important.
It is, but we get into resistance with that because it's a chronic state that we're used to being in.
Hmm.
You know, if you're used to not taking care of yourself to the capacity that you want to, that is embedded within your field. And when we
Hmm.
try to do something different, we might for a little while, but then we might find that we fall off the wagon again because we slide back into that familiar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you can look at the reason why you're
Hmm.
not, as opposed to just being like, I know I have to, I know I have to, I know I have to,
Right.
but look at the why am I resisting this? And when you get
Yeah.
into that level, then we can start
That's
to
the
make
deeper
those
healing.
changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's a
Yeah.
session look like for people when they talk to you? They do an hour on Zoom, and then you just kind of read them
Mhm.
and discuss what you're seeing and feeling and having a
Yeah.
conversation about it?
I really am a visual person. So I spend, most of the session with my eyes closed as I'm exploring
Yeah.
people's fields. And I just get visuals about what's happening with people and
Mm-hmm.
what they're carrying and why. We get into some timeline work a lot of times with past lives or something in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Particular ages come forward, particular experiences will come forward of where this wound started. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of awareness as to what's happening within. And then we start to clear it. And they
Yeah.
get a chance to see how that clearing works
Mm-hmm.
and to feel how it feels once that is not in them anymore.
Yeah.
And then also see how life is reflected. And I've
Yeah.
been working with a lot of teenagers now, which is great because they're all springing into this awakening, which is so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And in working with the kids, I also get a chance to hear from their parents to say, oh my gosh, he's so different. He's got a light in his eyes now. He's so much more peaceful now.
Aw.
He's able to focus and concentrate better. He's actually aligning with friends that I want him to align with versus the other ones. Like all of
Yeah.
these things are coming up for people as kind of changes that happen based on this clearing. So I think that that's one thing about energy clearing that some people don't understand is the impact it can make in how
Yeah.
your entire life functions,
Yeah.
because you are just different and you're not operating from those old trauma wounds,
Right.
but you're operating from a free space, which
Yeah.
then allows you to align with the things that you want.
Yeah. You realize how much weight it takes up when you've released it. You're like, oh my God,
Right.
I feel like I lost 10 pounds.
Right. Because there's so much density in many of us,
Yeah.
and until we start, dropping that stuff off, it's a little harder to walk.
That's awesome about the teenagers because they carry so much. I've got 2 teenagers myself. So I was recently considering having my teacher work on either or both of them. But I just, because it's like they're so close to me that I feel like they need somebody outside of me to work on them. Like I kind of clear them and work on them a little bit, but they need somebody else, not me, to do that work. So that's awesome that you're doing that for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I do the same for my kids.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm too close. There's
right.
too much reflection of my own stuff. So we need some other input.
I know. I was telling my teacher about my one son and like whatever it was. And she's just like, oh, a lot of times with kids, and I know that too, that it's like kids and pets are reflections of the owner or the parent,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, like, what did I involuntarily like pass on to my child, but
right.
Yeah,
but I'm sure, the more work that you do on yourself, you actually
it goes up and down the line.
Yeah. Your entire ancestry and lineage. Yeah. So it's
fascinating.
Powerful.
I know one time during a Theta session with my teacher, Janet, she wanted to clear something on an ancestral level. And she kind of like convened with them, like they all kind of entered the room, and some of them were like agreeing to it, and others were like, no, like we should keep that belief, blah blah blah. She's like, oh my God, they're like arguing. Like some of them really wanted to hold on to something that wasn't good for me. Like I don't even remember what the issue was, but it was so hysterical because it was just like, yeah, there's a whole debate going on about why we want to keep this belief or not. So it was really cool. But yeah, and my own father being he's a deacon in the Catholic Church, so he's very faith-filled, but he also has his like limitations or his, whatever his, he doesn't believe in this or that, but he got more soft about it. And, he's heard Mother Mary, and he told one of his, parishioners are like, oh, I heard Mother Mary tell me this. And they're like, what are you, psychic? And he said, yes, I am. And I was like, oh my God, Dad said he's not a psychic. Like, this is a deacon saying he's psychic. Like, that's pretty cool. So it is, I'm like, I'm sure that's why he could admit that is because of the work that I've been doing, like I didn't come from nowhere, I don't think, because he definitely was closed off to that stuff before. So I thought it was pretty good.
Love that. I love that because a lot of times I think, my mom was a nun and my dad was a brother. And they met through their religious life and had a dispensation from the Pope to get married. So I feel you with things. And it's very, very structured. And you go through the priest to connect to God and you do all these things. There's like middlemen and things.
Yes.
And so, to just kind of feel your own intimate connection with that and trust that what you're getting, I think is scary for some people because they're
used to deferring.
That sort of tangible, yes, you're doing that in the right ways, or yes, this is okay, or kind of permission. And when you just allow that flow, it's like, oh, that's where it is. That's where it's at.
Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
love that for him.
That's pretty cool about your parents too. Wow.
Yeah, synchronistic.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you if they want to either learn more about you? I know you have a course that you're teaching too, or that you have online somewhere, right? Tell us about that.
It's called Limitless. And I developed this because I really was seeing the impact of other courses I created on people's lives and people that I'd never even talked to personally, how impactful it was in assisting them. And so I decided to create sort of my little labor of love, my Limitless course, which really challenges the foundation of what many of us have grown up with. And that's kind of a rickety foundation that's not really working.
Right.
So I help people to unpack all that stuff, to see where the weak spots are, to clear through aspects that aren't working, to challenge limiting beliefs, to understand what triggers are trying to say, to translate things. And then once we get you into a newly built, strong foundation, then I bring in aspects of love and abundance and the art of receiving and all these other things that need to be kind of built on a stronger foundation before they can really thrive. So Limitless sort of tackles all of those aspects and helps people just step into what they want in life, as opposed to continue to perpetuate the struggles of the past.
That's really awesome. I know it's nice to package up like your core offerings as a thing that could just people can do whenever, and it doesn't have to come straight from you all. It's just an efficient way to share information, because that's how I did my course too. Because I was like, I teach this stuff all the time. Let me just put it together and share it. So that's helpful. Yeah.
We can help so many more people up level that way, and still reserve our energy and work with the deeper level, one-on-ones as they resonate, and just continue to, help. That's our big mission.
Yeah.
So we're keep finding more ways to do it.
Right.
That's right.
So your website is your name? Right?
Yep, GeneAtman.com. Yep.
Okay.
Everything's on there. People can find.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, it was awesome talking to you. I appreciate you coming on here, and I'm sure I'll talk to you at some point in the future. And if you have anything else you want to bring up, like shout out, and we'll do another show.
That sounds great. Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was so nice chatting with you today.
Sure. Thanks so much. We'll see you.